a key, not only for diabetes control, but for health in general, is to control our weight. You know what I'm talking about. We want to knock off a few pounds. But before we go any further, there's one thing I really want to make clear. For so many of us, when we're talking about how much we weigh or what our goals are, we feel a little bit of guilt and sometimes a little bit of blame. You know what I mean? We think the foods that I ate were sinful, decadent. Who caused my problem? And I caused my problem. Somebody else caused my problem. There are moral issues with regard to eating and so forth, but for now, we're just going to set all that aside. Is that a deal? Okay. No blame, no guilt, and if you goofed up on what you're trying to eat, just dust yourself off. We're going to get right back on, okay? So, what are the foods that really pack in the calories? If a chicken eats a little bit too much, where does the chicken put those extra calories? In chicken fat. If a cow has extra calories, that goes into beef fat. If olives have more calories, where do they go? Into olive oil. Sounds funny to say that, doesn't it? But this is going to be the most important thing. This will be on the test. Fat has 9 calories in every gram. And any kind of fat, any kind of oil, is the most densely packed calories you're going to find anywhere. Let's take a lesson from Japan. The Japanese diet traditionally is based on what? Rice, noodles, lots of vegetables, not a lot of meat, and really no dairy products in a traditional Japanese diet. But what's been happening in Japan? Well, fast food chains have all come in. Business lunches are now meaty lunches and so forth. And so animal products have been roaring in, and rice is being forgotten, and waistlines are expanding in Japan. Diabetes rates in Japan more than doubled just between 1980 and 1990. So for those of us who thought, well, it's got to be genetic, genes did not change during that time. What changed was what we were eating, or what they were eating. And that means waistlines expand rapidly, diabetes comes in very quickly, but it can go the opposite way just as fast when we improve our diets. So where are the fatty foods? Well, meats, dairy products, but also nuts. Now, nuts are rather high in fat, unfortunately. There are some health benefits to nuts, but if it goes too far, you're packing in a lot of fat that you don't need. And where this really becomes a problem, I got to tell you, when I was a kid growing up in Fargo, North Dakota, there were some times where lunch for me was a jar of peanut butter and a spoon. Don't do that. Okay, there are a couple of other plant foods that are rather high in fat. Olives, avocados. Isn't that sad? They are so delicious, aren't they? But they're very high in fat, so go easy there as well. Some of the soy products are rather high in fat, too. Be careful about them. And be careful about sugar. Now, sugar is not anywhere near as high in calories as any of the fats, but sugar is a stealth nutrient. It's invisible. When you add to a 20-ounce soda all the sugar that goes in there, you end up with 250 calories that nobody needs at all. So be careful about sugar, too. So you want to go low fat and low sugar, but also go high fiber. Fiber is that boring word. You hear everybody talk about high fiber foods are good. Fiber is your best friend, and here's why. When I say fiber, you know what I'm talking about? Plant roughage. Well, it fills up your stomach, and it tricks your brain into thinking that you've eaten a lot when, in fact, you have really not eaten very much. So that the slimming down becomes absolutely just automatic because you get full sooner. I'm going to give you some numbers. Every 14 grams of fiber that you add to your daily diet cuts your overall calories by about 10%. Let me give you an example. Let's say an average person is consuming about 12 grams of fiber per day. That would be pretty common. So if I'm going to add 14 grams of fiber to my diet, I started out with 12, I add 14, where am I now? 26. Okay, so that is going to cut my calories by about 10%. So what that means is if I need 2,000 calories to feel satisfied now, and I add that extra 14 grams of fiber, tomorrow I'm going to be satisfied with 1,800 calories. I'm going to think I ate exactly as much as before, but I didn't. If you measure it, you're eating about 10% less. So let's add another 14 grams. I'm at 26. I'm going to add 14 grams. I'm up to 40. Okay, now I don't even need 1,800 calories. My calorie intake is dropping, but my brain thinks I'm eating exactly the same. So the reason why this diet is so good is because it allows you to eat less without any punishment. You feel like you're eating the same amount. So, all right, how much fiber is in typical foods? All right, I'm going to take you through an exercise where inside of about 5 minutes, you're going to know how much fiber there is in the whole produce department without looking at a list. Let's take an apple. How much fiber is there in an apple? Well, you're not going to know, right? So I'm going to give you a couple of hints. The first is an apple from a plant? Sure, so it has to have some fiber. And your average person in the course of a day gets, between 10 and 15 grams of fiber in a whole day. So if you get between 10 and 15 in a day, how much could be in one apple? Give me a number. 2, 3, 3, 5? Okay, good, good. You're in the right ballpark. About 3.7 in an average apple, with a little more or a little less depending on the size and variety. How about a banana? Now let me give you a hint. A banana is not quite as fibrous as a typical apple. So what would you say for a banana? How many grams of fiber in a banana? 2, 3? Okay, about 2.7 in an average one, and a little more, a little less, depending on the size of it. Okay, so for typical fruits, we're going to say about 3 grams of fiber for a typical fruit anywhere in the produce department. Well, how about vegetables? If I take vegetables, are they a little more fibrous compared to, say, a juicy orange? Sure. So if I have a cup of broccoli, how much fiber would you say is in broccoli? Okay, actually, very good. About 4.6 in an average cup of broccoli. Very good. A little bit more, a little bit less, depending on how you produce it exactly. How about carrots? Are they more like that, or are they more like an orange? No, carrots are fibrous, rather like broccoli and spinach, so they're going to have similar fiber content. Give me a number for carrots. 4, 5. Very good. About 5.2. Green beans. Green beans? Okay, so you're all in the right ballpark. So everybody knows it's going to be right around 4. All right, fruits, 3 on average. Vegetables, about 4 on average. Very simple. Now, beans are your fiber champions. Beans, a half a cup of beans has about 7 grams of fiber in just that one serving. Now, white bread, only about 1 gram. Whole wheat, about 2. Typical cold cereals, about 3. Oatmeal, maybe about 4. And what I'm shooting for in the course of a day is about 40 grams of fiber in the course of a day. And if you do that, what you find is you feel satisfied and you have an easier time losing weight. Now, let's shift gears. I want to talk about the glycemic index. That's a word you hear about, and it gets rather confusing. Well, what is it? It is a way of choosing carbohydrates. You know, there are different kinds of carbohydrates. Some carbohydrates, in the simplest form, taste sweet. These are sugars. And what that means is it's just 1 or 2 tiny sugar molecules on your tongue. It triggers the sweet sensation. If I join all those sugars together, that makes a starch or a complex carbohydrate, and it's not sweet anymore. So the key is this, that if I have many, many sugar molecules joined together in a starch, in your digestive tract, it breaks apart either gradually or very quickly. Different foods affect your blood sugar very differently. So in 1981, Dr. David Jenkins invented a test called the glycemic index. And this is a way to find out which of these starchy foods release their sugars really rapidly into the blood and which are more gentle. And it's the gentle ones that you want. So what he did is he brought in volunteers, he fed them different carbohydrate-containing foods, and he just measured their blood sugar over the next couple of hours, and he showed that certain foods, sugar, white bread, wheat breads, they tend to cause blood sugar to rise rapidly, whereas something like broccoli or beans have very little effect on your blood sugar. Now, you can look online or in books and you'll see lists. And if you happen to, if it's 55 or less, that's low. If it's 70 or higher, that's high. And the low ones are the ones you want. But rather than have you have to consult lists, let me just share with you the real keys, and then you're never going to have to look at a list. It'll make it very simple. The high glycemic index foods, the foods that when you eat them tend to cause your blood sugar to rise rapidly, are sugar itself, that's no surprise, right? White bread, and surprisingly enough, wheat bread. Now, don't get me wrong, whole wheat bread is a good thing, but if you chose rye or pumpernickel, for whatever reason, they tend to be much more gentle on your blood sugar. Now, big white baking potatoes, they tend to cause your blood sugar to rise, but yams or sweet potatoes, not really so much. Cold cereals, they tend to cause your blood sugar to rise, especially if they have a toy inside. Yes, skip those. But bran cereals or oatmeal are much better for you. Now, here's a surprise. Fruits are fine. We tend to think, well, fruits are sweet, and they are, but they have less effect on your blood sugar compared to other foods. Okay? So we're not going to restrict them at all. So just to summarize, sugar itself, white bread, wheat breads, white potatoes, and cold cereals. And there are good replacements for all of these. Instead of white bread, have rye, have pumpernickel. Instead of a typical potato, why not have a yam or a sweet potato? Instead of cold cereals, have a big bowl of oatmeal, have bran cereals. And my GI champions, they're the bean group. You know, let me say a word of praise about the beans. Beans have protein, they have iron, they have calcium, they have a little bit of soluble fiber, they even have a trace of omega-3. They don't have a good lobby group. But we love the bean. Okay, there are also some good grains. The rye bread we were talking about before, but there are also some others. Rice, especially basmati rice or converted rice, perfectly fine. Bulgur is good. We talked about fruit as being a surprise. I have one more surprise. Pasta. So many people with diabetes are told, don't you ever touch pasta. But it turns out that pasta is, I'm talking about spaghetti or macaroni, it doesn't really have a very large blood sugar raising effect. And here's why. If I take bread, how do I make bread? I'll take flour, and I mix it with water, and then what am I going to mix in there so that it rises? I put some yeast in, and when that happens, it causes air pockets to form in the dough, and when I chew it up, the stomach acid and digestive enzymes go right into those air pockets, and what happens? They tear up that carbohydrate, it goes straight into my blood, and it raises my blood sugar. With pasta, does it have yeast in it? No, it doesn't. So instead, I just have the flour and the water, and it's rather densely packed, so no matter how you chew it up, it still digests slower than bread. So that's why we allow that. I got one more surprise. Once in a while, somebody will say to me, you know, Dr. Barnard, I looked online, and I saw that a greasy muffin actually has a lower glycemic index than your low-fat muffin. And you know what? That's true. And the reason is that if you pack a lot of grease into something you're eating, the carbohydrate has trouble getting out of it. That doesn't mean it's healthy. Okay? Greasy foods are unhealthy, even if they might have a lower glycemic index. Asphalt has a low glycemic index. Okay, that doesn't mean we want to eat it, right? Okay, so let's review. Which are the high glycemic index foods to worry about? Okay, sugar, good or bad? It's high glycemic index. All right, which kinds of bread tend to be high glycemic index? White bread and wheat bread. Isn't that surprising? I'm not saying wheat bread is terrible, but it does tend to raise the blood sugar. And which ones would I want to have instead? Rye or pumpernickel? Okay, very good. Which kind of potatoes are high glycemic index? Okay, white potatoes. And if I want to have a better kind of potato, what could I choose? Sweet potato. Sweet potatoes and yams. Okay, great. Which kinds of cereals tend to have a high glycemic index? Cold cereals except for? Bran. Okay, good. How about oatmeal? Is that high glycemic index or is that low glycemic? All right, good. Now, the other thing, the glycemic index is not rooted in time. It can change. If I am cooking my pasta, and pasta is a nice low glycemic index food, right? But the phone rings, and I go and I'm talking, and about 45 minutes later I think, oh, what about my pasta? And it's like turned to mush. Well, all that time, minute by minute by minute, the glycemic index has been going up. Or I've got some bananas there in the back seat of my car. 2 weeks later I think, oh, what's that smell? Well, hey, you've done this too. The glycemic index is going up as they're ripening. And combinations of foods, if I have some beans with some vegetables, with some rice, the glycemic index of the whole meal is just the average of all the different glycemic indices that went into it. Making sense? Okay? All right. Does this matter? The answer is yes, it does matter. At the University of Sydney, Jenny Brandmiller is a researcher who did a review of 14 different studies with almost 400 people, and she looked at what's the health benefit of going low GI, going low glycemic index. And what she showed was that if you incorporate a lot of these good, healthy, low glycemic index foods, this will cut between 0.3 and 0.6 off your hemoglobin A1C test. So if you want an A1C that's under 7 or as close to 6 as possible, put this to work. This is a good way to go.